Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the National Coalition for Food and Agricultural Research, also known as NCFAR, for today's Latte N Learn webinar featuring USDA Research, Education, and Economics leaders. We're going to give people a little bit of time to get into the room, so please just sit tight for a couple minutes. We know in this new Zoom land that sometimes people may be finishing up another meeting, so we'll just give it a couple minutes and then we'll get started. But thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, I don't like dead air, so I'm going to get us started. We have a good critical mass. We have 40 people and counting, so I think that's a good group for us to start the webinar. So NCFAR is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, consensus-based, and customer-led coalition that brings together food, agriculture, nutrition, conservation, and natural resource stakeholders to serve as a forum and unified voice supporting increased federal investment in USDA's entire REE portfolio. I'm Kelly Adesina. I'm Director of Government Affairs with Bayer and a member of NCFAR. I'll be moderating today's webinar, which features Dr. Carrie Castille, Director of USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, commonly referred to as NIFA. Dr. Castille serves a 6-year term that started in 2021. Audience participation is welcome, so please type any questions you may have throughout the discussion in the chat box so they can be addressed in today's webinar, and I will do my best to get to as many as possible. Dr. Castille, a Louisiana native, has championed agriculture and rural issues for more than 20 years, including serving as natural resource leader and assistant professor at Louisiana State University, which is LSU, and associate commissioner and science advisor to the commissioner for the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry. In 2017, Dr. Castille joined USDA as state director for Louisiana Rural Development. In 2019, she was named the Mid-South Coordinator for USDA's Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area, serving Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Missouri. Prior to joining USDA, she was appointed by USDA Secretary Vilsack to the National Agriculture Research, Extension, Education, and Economics Advisory Board. That was a mouthful. During her term, she served as chair of the board and contributed to many organizations, including the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, Council on Agriculture, Research, Extension, and Teaching. Dr. Castille was also a member of the National Food Animal Veterinarian Institute Board of Directors, a past chair of the Southern U.S. Trade Association Operations Committee, and a fellow of the Food Systems Leadership Institute. During her career, Dr. Castille has received a Secretary's Award of Excellence from Secretary Ann Benneman in 2003 and Secretary Sonny Perdue in 2018. She is the first woman to serve as NIFA Director in a non-acting capacity. So her bio is very extensive. I tried to take out as much as I could and wanted to give you a little bit of flavor of who she was, or who she is, but she has a very, very phenomenal background. We're so happy to have her. She's here today, including her senior leadership, and she's going to give opening remarks, and then we'll also hear from her team. So Dr. Castille, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kelly, and I'm really excited to be here today at the NCFAR's new Latte N Learn series. I got to say, it's really a great idea, and again, I really am honored. I am here with some of my senior leadership, and I'm going to turn to them after my remarks. But I also want to recognize that there may be a couple of individuals from our REE mission area, which is our research, education, and economics mission area. We have Ms. Sana Beg, as well as Dr. Shafali Mehta. Sana is our chief of staff at the mission area level, and Dr. Mehta is also our deputy undersecretary. And they've been doing a tremendous job in really elevating the importance of research, extension, and education, not only within the mission area, not only to our partners, but also throughout all of USDA. So I just want to give them a shout out as they are also on here. So I also want to acknowledge that NCFAR is really crucial to ag research and what we do at NIFA. So I really want to thank you for your support, and we really appreciate the unified voice that you have in supporting NIFA and all the agencies within the REE mission area. I know that Kelly will have some specific questions for us, but I wanted to take the time to really introduce NIFA to those who are new to agricultural research. So as Kelly had mentioned, NIFA is the extramural research funding agency at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're pleased to say that Congress has entrusted us with more than 70 funding programs, 74 budget lines, as well as a budget of almost $2 billion. We're providing funding mainly through our capacity, our formula, as well as our competitive programs. So NIFA also applies what we consider an integrated approach to research, education, and cooperative extension that really ensures that the groundbreaking discoveries in ag-related sciences and technologies really reach the people who can't put them into practice, So I'm sure you've heard of research and education, but cooperative extension may be something new to some of you. So I came from extension. I came from a 4-H background as well, participated in 4-H. So many of you probably know 4-H. And it's conducted through the nation's more than 100 land-grant colleges and universities in partnership with our federal, state, and local governments. Extension programs provide non-formal education and hands-on learning activities to people throughout the country, to farmers and other residents of rural communities, as well as to people living in urban America. Extension emphasizes taking knowledge gained through research and education and bringing it directly to the people to create positive changes. So my background, again, is in extension, and I know firsthand how, through the land-grant colleges and universities, extension brings vital, practical information to the people through our consumers, through our business owners, through our agricultural producers, and through 4-H to our youth. 4-H is also funded by NIFA through extension. So our experts lead program development, and extension tailors those programs for local needs and resources and implements them in every community nationwide to more than 6 million young people. So again, 4-H is a model program for the practice of positive youth development by engaging our young people within their communities, within their schools, within their organizations and peer groups, as well as their families, in a way that it's productive and constructive and recognizes and uses and enhances their strengths. So also a strong partnership between NIFA is our stakeholders, as well as Congress. So they're vital to our mutual success. Sessions like these are a great way for us to use today's technology to have virtual visits and develop relationships while we're waiting to return to work and travel. Over the past couple of years, we've built a strong and talented NIFA workforce, with many of our new staff coming from our premier partners at the land-grant universities. And we just finished a week-long NIFA orientation for all of our new employees and learned so much during this week. So this Latte N Learn is a strong next step, and I want to appreciate my husband who just brought me my latte as well as a chocolate. So thank you. So if you saw him come in earlier. I also want to tell you that collaboration and partnership are crucial for NIFA. I'm committed to working together to help our farmers, our producers, our ranchers, and our consumers. So please let me and the staff know if you have any ideas. So you probably know Josh Stahl, who's our NIFA stakeholder affair, and he's a really, really great place to start having those conversations. So first, let me thank NCFAR for inviting us to participate and giving us the opportunity to talk about NIFA and our work. We look forward to continuing these conversations, hopefully in person, too. So together we can work to provide the innovation as well as the talent that's needed to solve the global challenges that we all face. So as I mentioned earlier, I have some NIFA senior leadership with me. So let me introduce them quickly to you. So first we have Dr. Parag Chitnis, our Associate Director for Programs. We have Dr. Kevin Kephart, our Deputy Director for the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate and the Environment. We have Dr. Suzanne Sluka, our Deputy Director for Food Safety and Nutrition. We have Dr. Bill Hoffman, our Chief of Staff. And again, we have Josh Stahl, our Stakeholder Affairs Officer. So we're going to let Parag, Kevin, and Suzanne provide a few more remarks. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Parag. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Castille. This was a great introduction to NIFA, and I'm really glad to be here at the NCFAR event. As Dr. Castille already talked to us about, that we have about $2 billion of budget. That's what we had in FY21. 43% of that is provided to the State Agricultural Experiment Station and Cooperative Extension Service through using formulas. And in this way, NIFA supports a network of experiment stations across the country, as well as the Cooperative Extension Service, and has a reach in every corner of the country, all states. And the remaining part of our budget is provided through competitive programs. And these competitive programs address today's needs, as well as allow NIFA to support research, extension, education activities for tomorrow's opportunities. With these programs are expanding market opportunities, they're ensuring robust and resilient supply chains for agriculture, as well as they broaden participation of underserved individuals, communities, and institutions in agricultural sciences. For example, about $250 million worth of programs are investing in minority serving institutions that include 1890 universities, 1994 universities, as well as Hispanic serving institutions across the country. We are also supporting interagency programs by working with other agencies, such as the National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, UK Research and Innovation Agency, and many others, which allows us to leverage our investments along with their investments and bring talent to solve agricultural problems from diverse expertise areas such as computer science, mechanical engineering, and chemical engineering. We also support programs for some special needs such as specialty crops, organic agriculture, or urban agriculture. And all of these ways we can support how opportunities are increasing for the producers as well as consumers. There is a whole suite of programs on education as well. They support non-formal education, and 4-H is something that I think Dr. Castille has already talked to you about, and that's an important component of NIFA's program portfolio. We also support working with the high school teachers in agriculture. We also support the undergraduate schools, community colleges, and graduate and postdoctoral education. We support beginning investigators as well as beginning farmers, ranchers, and foresters in learning how to farm. In these capacities, again, as I mentioned to you, we have been supporting the current needs of farming communities as well as consumers, and we are providing catalytic and support for many new areas that are going to transform agriculture for the future. Kevin and Suzanne can talk about some of the specific areas where our emphasis has been. Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Parag, and thank you, Dr. Castille, as well for teeing this up for us. I'm Kevin Kephart. I'm the Deputy Director for the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment. And it's a pleasure for me to be here today. Actually, 20 years ago, I was an experiment station director at South Dakota State, part of the initiation of NCFAR. Worked closely with, my recollection was Tom Payne, the Dean of Ag at University of Missouri, and he gathered several of us together to help set this up. So it's really nice to be back and learn more about what's happened in the last 20 years. Like I said, I'm with NIFA now. I have been with NIFA for about 2 years now. Before that, I was with Indigo Ag along with Laura Wood Peterson, and we got to know each other there. And then before that, 30 years at South Dakota State University, with the last 11 years being the Vice President for Research. Now here at NIFA, I'm really pleased with the position I'm in right now of leading and being involved in these critical issues that we have before us today. Well, what is a bigger issue to be a part of and trying to solve with your help, and that is climate, environment, and related areas. And there's a lot of overlap with related areas, such as bioenergy and nutrition security. You'll hear about that from Suzanne, and diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So all of these things interact with each other and touch upon each other. Now, within climate-specific areas, I'll be trying to work with all of you to develop opportunities, research support, et cetera, for agricultural related issues when it comes to climate, such as climate-smart agriculture and forestry. And that's going to need support from public researchers, in addition to extension personnel and others as well, folks in the classroom. In addition to climate smart agriculture and forestry, we also are prioritizing measurement, monitoring, and mitigation of ag-related greenhouse gases. Methane in particular, but not methane exclusively. So emissions related to agricultural practices, whether it's tillage or animal agriculture or other aspects. And certainly other things such as water quality, water quantity, soil health, and those types of things that we support through capacity funds and competitive funds such as AFRI. Economic development is also very important to our area. That's through such things as biomanufacturing, agriculture support for bioenergy, biofuels, those types of issues. Sustainable aviation fuels in particular is a primary emphasis for the administration. A big part of our role in that, besides the conversion aspects, are feedstocks, evaluation of feedstocks, developing those through plant breeding or through agronomic practices, and then the logistics of feedstocks and getting them to conversion facilities. We also support this through our SBIR programs. Now, NIFA is in charge of, or NIFA is responsible for implementation of small business innovation research that has relevance to our university partners as their tech transfer offices are trying to stand up innovations that they've come upon through their research activities. If that makes its way to starting a startup company or partnering with another company, and NIFA's SBIR programs are here to support those early stage activities to get them on their way. And that's a non-diluting source of capital for those small enterprises. We also have a lot of work on environmental related practices or issues related to agriculture. I mentioned soil health earlier and water. That also extends into agricultural ecosystems and such things as atmospheric deposition of emissions. We have a network that we support all across the country for measurement of that. Our division or our institute supports forestry that Parag mentioned, especially through the McIntyre Stennis Capacity Program for research and through the RREA Capacity Program for extension. And then I want to wrap this up by something that's really becoming more and more important as we go forward. I work with this every single day, and that's environmental justice. That goes along with our responsibilities and our interests on climate. So environmental justice, particularly an administrative initiative called the Justice 40 Initiative. We're developing our plans right now, identifying covered programs and how to bolster them to be in alignment with that particular initiative. So that's all I have for right now. I'm looking forward to this visit and interacting, and I'll hand it over to Suzanne. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And as a former jackrabbit, I saw that in the Q&A popping up as well. Just giving a shout out to South Dakota State University too. But no, it's a pleasure to join you today, talk about nutrition security, a topic that I'm very passionate about as a registered dietitian. So just really wanted to set the stage a little bit, make sure we're have a common definition here. And so nutrition security means having that consistent access, that availability, the affordability of foods and beverages that promote well-being and prevent, if needed, or treat disease. And so we're talking particularly among like racial and ethnic minority populations, lower income populations, and rural and remote populations. And so why is this so important? It's so important because food insecurity and diet-related chronic diseases, they often coexist. And diet-related chronic diseases are some of the leading causes of death in this country. And we know that they disproportionately affect communities of color, rural communities, remote communities, lower income communities. And so we just really want to build that solid foundation for all of us to have this active, healthy life and really apply an equity lens to making sure that everyone has access, availability, and affordability to foods and beverages. And so this has been mentioned by my colleagues, but it really is a critical ingredient to tackle things like the COVID-19 pandemic, to ensuring racial equity, to rebuilding the economy, to addressing climate change, open markets, and a competitive workforce. I did want to highlight one of our programs that are offered here in nutrition security, and that's the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, or as we like to call it, GusNIP for short. And we just had a report released in January, and it shows how the GusNIP grantees are conducting nutrition incentive and produce prescription programs and projects in both rural and urban areas, as well as rural and urban tribal communities. And I just wanted to highlight a few of those areas that I was just so impressed by. And so the nutrition incentive project participants, they redeemed almost 20 million of fruit and vegetable incentives just from a project period of September 1, 2020 to August 31 of 2021. And so what that did for the local economy is that it brought in about $40 million into those local communities. And so about doubling so the incentive amount. We also found that those SNAP participants that participated in nutrition incentive programs, they're consuming almost a fourth of a cup more fruits and vegetables if they're participating at a farmer's market incentive program, and a half a cup more if they're participating in like grocery store nutrition incentive programs. So we are seeing increased consumption of those fruits and vegetables. And we're also seeing household food security increase. It went from about 28% to 49%. And so we just really want to give a shout out to that program and the grantees and the difference that they're making in their communities. Many of you know and support FNEP, and FNEP is our capacity program that also looks at areas like diet quality, food safety, and food security. And so that's funded through our capacity funds and about 76 institutions, and those are 1890 and 1862 institutions that are delivering that formula funding. And so that audience is really working with families, youth, and children with low incomes, parents, and caregivers. And it's reaching more than 88,000 adults and 300,000 youth annually. And it's more than a century old program. So it's been offered since 1969. And so again, I just really wanted to emphasize that that's been in our portfolio and longstanding. You heard from Dr. Kephart earlier, who spoke to climate change, and I also wanted to weave that in and make the connection with our nutrition security teamwork. And so really early in 2021, we began working with his team and others across NIFA to really strengthen those intersections between climate change, food systems, and nutrition security. And so whether it be working with USDA climate hubs and that extension work, to the AFRI Sustainable Ag System program and grantees. Finally, I just really wanted to shout out and thank my nutrition security team here at NIFA. It's a cross-agency priority team that's really helping to shepherd these efforts. And we have a team of about more than 50 NIFA colleagues who are really passionate about leveraging our agency's integrated approach to prioritizing nutrition security through research, education, and extension. And finally, I just really want to give special attention to my team and my staff in the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition, and to our NIFA leadership and our leadership who are here on the call today for all their help in making our efforts around nutrition security a success. So thank you for your time.
So thank you so much for the brief overview and indication of what you all do over at NIFA. And so I'm looking at the attendees, and I know we don't have a shy bunch on our hands, so definitely feel free to put some questions in the chat. I know some of the people in here personally, and I know that you all have some good questions. So I want to encourage you to be active in this conversation. And so one of the questions that I wrote down as I was listening to all of you, and actually, Suzanne, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I know there are more. I wanted to hear what are some of the key accomplishments that NIFA had in fiscal year 2021? And then two, as a follow-up to that question, what are some of the focus or goals that you all have going into the new fiscal year?
Thanks, Kelly. Well, I'll go ahead and get started and tell you that we had a phenomenal year in 2021. We're looking forward to a successful year in 2022. One of the things that you heard as a common theme is getting the resources out to the people that need it through our land-grant universities, serving our historically underserved communities, but also our farmers, ranchers, and really partnering with you. We're really, really proud to say that we have over 300 experts that are now part of our NIFA team. So we've really built the agency, bringing in the best and the brightest. And we're continuing to look at these new opportunities in which we can continue to build in a very thoughtful and intentional manner. We are really, really pleased with the remarkable progress that's been made in just this year getting funding out the door. So we've gotten 50% of the funding out the door just in January. These aren't goals that I set, but I think it's a testament to the teams that we brought in and the individuals that we brought in. And again, we're very, very proud of those accomplishments. We're also able to forge a partnership with the National Science Foundation with our artificial intelligence centers. We also have a partnership with CDC looking at rural vaccine education, our Excite program. We also have our agribusiness centers of excellence, which really go to support our minority serving institutions and provide that much needed technical assistance to our historically underserved populations. Suzanne talked about GusNIP. We had a tremendous year around GusNIP and that program that really, and I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Gus Schumacher, and I hope he would be proud of the progress that we've made, particularly in this space. And then we also have our beginning farmer and rancher development program. So the goals, what are we looking at? So we want to make sure that we are working to work with our communities, work with industry, but also internally and throughout USDA within our agricultural workforce and pipeline. We want to make sure that we're better integrating extension, teaching, as well as research. We're also looking at sustainability through the work that Kevin's doing and the work of the scientists and working throughout the entire research community. But also, I think something that we're very, very proud of is our work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, where we really want to make sure that we are serving people fairly as well as equitably. We're looking at our panels, we're looking at our workforce, and we're making sure that there's equity in science. One thing to mention is our 1890 scholarships. I'm going to ask Dr. Bill Hoffman to talk a little bit about that, but something an effort that's really important to be able to serving and building that pipeline, particularly with our minority serving institutions. So Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you very much, Director. I wanted to mention the 1890 scholarships program because the secretary was in Lincoln at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri yesterday. And he was announcing a program for a different mission area, the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. But he was very effusive in his praise for the 1890 scholarship recipients that he had met on his trip. With funding from the 1890 Scholarships Program, Lincoln University established what they call the David Scott Full Ride Scholarship Program. And in the first year, this new program provided full scholarships for 29 students majoring in agriculture or related sciences. More than a dozen additional students will be funded in year number 2. Now, that's just one of our of the 1890s that are benefiting from this program. So, so if you think about the nationwide impact that we've had regarding putting those dollars to work in the form of tuition, books, retention programs, it's just made an amazing impact. That program is funded through the Farm Bill at $10 million per year. And last year we added an additional $10 million through appropriation, and it's really going to good use. And it's not just that program that is very much appreciated by our 1890 universities. Dr. Castille mentioned our Centers of Excellence programs, but the bread and butter are really the 1890 Capacity Building Program, the 1890 Facilities Program, the 1890 Extension Program, and Evans Allen for research. All of those programs make up a suite of programs that the 1890s really depend on. And in addition to those 1890s, I don't want to forget the other MSIs that include the Hispanic serving institutions that we serve, and also the 1994s and other programs that serve Indian country. We have a suite for our 1994s. So I just wanted to mention some of our minority serving programs to remind you that those schools in particular really rely on NIFA funding, and they are really stretching those dollars that you provide and putting them to good use. I'll turn the program back over to Dr. Castille.
Oh, thanks, Bill. And those are really impactful programs. And then the last thing is really a personal goal, really to be able to gather feedback from you and input. As we're continuing to grow our agency, I really want to hear from you. I want to hear from you how we're doing. What are the areas for opportunity? And then also if there's areas that we might have missed it. And so if we didn't achieve what we were intending to achieve, please let us know. But that's really my personal goal is just to be able to gather as much feedback to be able to make better decisions based on the people that we serve. So, and I do want you to know that we really do use it. As we gather this feedback, I want to make sure that you see yourself in these recommendations and these improvements. So thanks, Kelly, for that question.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to take a little point of personal privilege. I had the opportunity to work on Capitol Hill in my former life. I worked in the 2018 Farm Bill and had the opportunity to work on that 1890 scholarship language. And it was definitely one of the highlights of working on Capitol Hill. And I noticed in the chat, we have someone, Paul Braithwaite, who represents the 1890s. I can't remember exactly which function, because there's like the different iterations of councils and whatnot. And I don't want to misspeak, but he was very instrumental too in helping us with that. And so I wanted to thank him while I had the opportunity to do so. So I'll get back to the program. We have some questions come in, but before I get to those questions, I wanted to ask one more question just to, I guess, set the tone for the discussion and help people understand, if they don't, kind of how NIFA operates. And so how do both capacity and competitive program, help to achieve NIFA's goals?
Thanks. So I think the biggest distinction is capacity funding is really the foundational funding for the land grant universities, our experiment stations, as well as the cooperative extension service, to really look at the infrastructure, building that expertise, as well as the programs that support their efforts. And then those build to them seeking competitive funding. So the two are linked. Kevin and Suzanne really have some experience in working with these in the land grant universities and how they translate to each other. So I'll also ask them to weigh in for their experiences as well.
Sure, I'll just jump in on the experiment station side, since that was some of my experience, especially through the Hatch Act, McIntyre-Stennis, Animal Health Capacity Funds. I view those as funds that help support essential research within the states. Now, they're not competitive funds, but those of us at NIFA rely on the directors of the respective states to know, especially have a solid knowledge of what the needs are for their specific state. And the needs of Alabama is undoubtedly going to be different than they are, Laura, in Montana or in Washington or other places. So that director has to build a team of scientists that can address the needs of the state, and also know the stakeholders in that state to continuously build a relationship and get input from them on using research to address those questions. Now, as that research goes forward, we especially also need capacity funds to help support the translation and the implementation of the knowledge that is generated by the research side of that. That's where our capacity funds for Smith-Lever and other funds that support extension that are out there. So it builds a value chain of the land grant enterprise, from understanding what the problems are on the ground level, not at the national level, but at the state and local level, addressing that and then translating that so that it does our stakeholders direct good in managing their farms or their economic enterprises.
Yeah, and I'll add from the extension piece, so working 15 years on that side, that capacity funding is really there to give you that base and that security, where you might have like family and consumer sciences, for example, one of my fields. Where we saw the competitive funding, and I think this was so beautiful, was that you could take some risks, right? You could have some innovation really happening with that competitive funding. So you might not have the money want to, but you can with the competitive, and then come back and say, hey, now we have the data. This is what our clients are asking for. Let's figure out now a way to maybe shape or change our extension system and integrate this. And so they really are so beautiful because they can bounce off of each other, and you can really have some really innovative movement in moving forward those systems.
Maybe I can add something to it. Some of that work that these capacity funds do, you can never get it funded through competitive grants. For example, the long-term research, if there's a planned breeding project, you need 10 years of investment consistently in getting the variety to the farmers. If you have long-term ecological, environmental monitoring work, you need long-term support that the capacity funds give. Secondly, if there is immediate need on the ground, like what extension system does, when there is a natural disaster, they are out there helping farmers and rural communities right away. And that's something a competitive program won't be able to get right to the people who need it.
I'll add in another comment if I could, and that is one thing that we didn't touch upon is that the capacity funds are what fuels the partnership. So we know on Hatch and on Smith-Lever's side that there is a required contribution from non-federal or state funds to help bring that about. And then that brings us all to the table as partners to benefit extension and research in these areas.
Thank you. Well, it looks like the questions
Kelly,
are rolling in.
If you don't mind me adding one last thought is, and you can see from the diversity of our profile, really what we're looking at is the integration between the basic sciences, the applied sciences, and really the dissemination. And we're blessed that NIFA is an agency that's nimble enough to be able to do so, has the funding structure in order, as Suzanne says, to be able to take some calculated risks and be able to see those if they work and what that really looks like. And so it's we're really in a great position and in a great role. And through our partnerships, we have been able to see a lot of that really being translated to solutions that are on the ground. So thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. So we have some good questions now in the chat. So I'll ask this one. To what extent will NIFA's climate adaptation plan address working with external partners and new climate-related research programs?
Thanks. So Kelly, I'll start by saying, and then I'll turn it over to Kevin. So climate is one of the areas that we jumped in early at the beginning of last year, really knowing that there was tremendous opportunities, knowing that the administration was really going to look at how we address climate change. Coming from Louisiana, climate change looks a little different. It manifests itself in hurricanes and weather-related events. And then out west, for example, we have wildfires. And I think the importance of this is really that geographic innovation piece, but also working with our external stakeholders and being able to partner with them. One example is with the Extension Service partnering with the climate hubs. But I'll also let Kevin fill in some of that as well. Thanks.
Well, to be effective, that really defines what NIFA does. For us to be effective, we have to partner with folks out there throughout the landscape, and that's the value of the land grant community. We also partner with non-land grant colleges of agriculture because there are some very important capabilities and knowledge base there, as well as other non-land grant institutions through our competitive funds. As many of you know, we are currently drafting the agency's climate adaptation plan as required by the executive order from the president. That's due the end of the month. We were one of the few USDA agencies actually to have a special event a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, that brought in or provided an opportunity for external stakeholders to give us input. And then we extended the period of time for receiving written input for that. The team that's writing that is working even as we speak right now, assessing, analyzing that external input for us to utilize in the plan. And they'll be drafting that up for the director to review here in a few days. So yes, for us to be successful, we have to partner with external parties.
Go to another question from our Q&A. So the question is, nutrition insecure populations are usually eligible for Title IV Farm and Food Bill programs. Can we achieve quicker and more responsible outcomes by focusing those benefits towards nutritionally proper foods and making unhealthy food choices ineligible?
And so thank you for that question. Again, our goal is really to be able to provide the support and resources to the communities that need it. I'm going to ask Suzanne, who has a lot more experience with our nutrition programs, maybe to chime in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in some instances, that's sort of a policy question. And so, policy is maybe not in NIFA's wheelhouse. We're research, education, and extension. And so really, I mean, this could be a research question for sure in looking at those outcomes. I think we really also want to be careful and really seek out that traditional knowledge that communities possess and that individuals possess. And so what is it that they, see as nutritionally proper or a healthy food choice? And so I think there's a lot to the question that you're asking. And so I think as we continue to document programs like GusNIP, and we talked about how they're making an impact and the focus that they have on fruits and vegetables, that we are making a difference. And so I guess I'll stop there and hope that I answered your question.
Thank you for that. So this question, I'm going to ask it, and honestly, I don't know the answer to this, and so I'll be interested in hearing it. So question is, predoctoral students are critical to robust research programs and lead to the next generation of academic and extension leaders. Most NIH grants cover at least a portion of graduate student tuition, but many USDA programs do not. Is there any consideration to changing this? And I know generally speaking, there are some, grant programs that the department does. I know the 1890 Scholars Program is the one that comes to my head, but if anyone can answer this question, that'd be great.
Thanks. And so Kelly, to your point about the 1890 scholarships program, we're working with our land grant partners, and particularly our 1890 partners, to be able to look at and evaluate what this could look like for our 1890 scholarships and our scholars at the master's and doctoral level. We also have a program within our AFRI program that also supports the postdoc researchers. I'll also ask Bill and Parag maybe to chime in and provide a little bit more details as well.
I'll let you go, Parag.
Yeah, so yes, I think Carrie brought that AFRI pre-doctoral and postdoctoral fellowship programs. The pre-doctoral fellowship program does offer tuition. Up to $22,000 can be included as tuition in those grants. The research grants, many of them won't offer because of the limitations from those authorizing legislation. So whenever the authorizing legislation allows us, we allow people to include tuition in their applications.
Thank you so much for that. So I did have a question. This one I like to ask of people because I think sometimes this is helpful to learn a little bit more about people individually. And so maybe quickly you all can tell us, how did you all get involved in ag, food, and natural resource science and extension? How did you get involved in this industry, generally speaking?
Thanks, Kelly. So I'll kind of start with my path, which really has been growing up in a rural farming community. So I'm from a little small community called Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. And if some people know Breaux Bridge, but for my family, we lived in a community called Ruth. We had 2 stop signs. Everything was really built around the community. I'm a first-generation college graduate in my family, which I'm extremely proud of, and I really owe a lot to the land grant. So the first time that I stepped on a land grant campus was actually in 4-H and showing livestock. From there, my 4-H agent, which also became the county agent, and then eventually moved up to the state office at LSU. When I graduated from high school, he asked me if I was interested in coming to work for the LSU Ag Center. And so I said, absolutely. I started out on a soft money position. Within a few years, I was able to get my master's and my PhD, and really provided with an opportunity to look at how cooperative extension can really touch the lives of people, but also the importance of research that can also influence our ways of thinking, and again, provide those real world solutions to those real world problems. So the rest really unfolds from there. I had an opportunity to also serve as the Associate Commissioner of Agriculture in Louisiana, and really learn about the regulatory piece and learned about policy and how decisions are made. And so I'm really blessed to be able to have that state government role, and then now the federal government role. And I've also had an opportunity to work within industry and supporting the USA Rice Federation, but also every single commissioner, secretary, and director of agriculture through NASDA, the National Association of State Departments of Ag. But I will tell you, this role is kind of a culmination of all these, being able to provide, I think, just a finer point and really have that connection and that impact to the people that we serve. So I'll stop there and see if anybody else has any input.
Maybe I can tell my story about how I got into agriculture. My father was a farmer, small farmer. Not very far from where I live currently in Kansas, about 8,000 miles away in India. But he grew very different crops, rice, mangoes, and he had a dairy of water buffaloes. But the problems he faced in terms of labor, in terms of access to information and capital, were the same problems that the farmers around me here in Kansas face. So that's what motivated me to come to agriculture. And I had a choice between going to genetics plant breeding or ag economics. I took simpler path.
It's always fascinating. So Kelly, let me add, it's always fascinating. I've been working with Parag for a little while, and it's always great to be able to hear those stories. So thank you, Kelly, for asking that question.
Absolutely. I just think that sometimes it's just good to have some insight as to how people got into the field. You know, I don't necessarily have a great story for getting involved in agriculture. I'm originally from New Jersey, a very urban part of the Garden State, but I got involved in agriculture by working for a member of Congress. And at the time I went to work for her, it was during the 2014 Farm Bill. And so I've been in ag ever since. So my story is not as, you know, interesting as the two stories we've heard thus far, but it's always good to just kind of hear how people got their start.
Hey, Kelly, 4 out of 4 people eat, right?
That's right.
So you are an ag.
That is true. I always say the thing that we have in common is most people want access to healthy and nutritious food. So if we can start there, we can then figure out the rest. Okay. Bill, did you want to say something? I saw you off mute. Did you want to give your story really quickly?
You know, my story is pretty simple. I grew up on the Penn State Agronomy Research Farm, where my dad was on the agronomy faculty. He was a no-till guy. And so it's really genetic for me.
Okay, so I think we have just one last question. We have about 8 minutes, and I'll see if we can just squeeze it in really quickly. The question is, NIFA has split national leadership locations, DC and Kansas City. What are the advantages or / disadvantages of this arrangement, and will it be continued for the long term?
Thanks, and thank you for this question. So what I really like to focus on is really the NIFA of the future, and so I appreciate the context of this question. The great thing is within, you know, there's been a silver lining for COVID, which is we've been able to telework and been able to demonstrate that we can do things in a virtual environment. And again, being able to provide resources, get money out the door, 50% of our funding out the door faster than we ever have. And so having this virtual environment, being able to bring in the best and the brightest and really provide that type of work-life balance has been beneficial. It is something that we think about and what this looks like. But, you know, we're currently having conversations with the unions and those types of things as to what this looks like. But, you know, I got to say, I focus on the success and really what we've done for building the future, and really, really proud of these folks. Regardless if it's Kansas City, DC, wherever else it might be, we're here to serve no matter what.
I love that. It's a great response. You know, one of the things I think the pandemic has shown us is that, you know, we found out that we can do these jobs from multiple locations. And, you know, a lot of us have gotten creative. You know, I'm working from my home right now and doing that as a lobbyist. And I've had to learn to adapt. And so the word for me last year was flexibility. And I think I'm going to continue using that word for 2022, because I think we've all had to learn how to be flexible in these interesting times. So we have about 5 minutes left, and Dr. Castille, I really wanted to, you know, see if you or your team had any closing remarks that you wanted to share, or any additional points that you wanted to make before we end the webinar.
So I'll just start with a thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to really have this forum to introduce our leaders, talk about the impacts of the work that we're having, and really continue to build on this partnership. I hope that we're going to have an opportunity to come back. I saw some great questions there, and one in particular is working with our other federal science agencies like NSF. My goal is to be able to reach out to our federal family and to be able to see how we can maximize our impact and really work together and partner. So we're going to be reaching out not only to the other federal science agencies, but also federal departments, if it's Department of Energy or if it's NASA. The goal is really, again, through geographic innovation and real world discoveries to be able to solve real world problems. So I am really, really thankful for this opportunity in this forum. I'm grateful for our staff and the almost 309 people that we have working for NIFA. I do want to hear from you. And again, I want to emphasize the importance of feedback and your insight. You have a lot to contribute to us, and I feel that NIFA is your organization. So as we continue to look towards the future, I want to hear from you at every opportunity that I get. If it's not the Latte N Learn opportunities, it's other opportunities, and we want to make sure that we're participating and providing you with that insight. And I want you to be proud of us. We're really in a great position and proud of the work that we're doing and proud of our partners. So thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks to NCFAR for the opportunity to jump on and bring some of my closest friends with me and our leaders, and also answer some of your questions.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. As you can tell, this webinar has highlighted the importance of NCFAR support for USDA REE. And just wanted to echo the remarks that Dr. Castille just said. NIFA is here. They are willing to hear from you. And so I hope that the people on this call will really take that to heart. And thank you all again for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.